I'm your host, as always, Adam Martin. I'll be taking you guys through the latest in the world of mixed martial arts. Guys, I hope you had a great weekend. Follow me on Twitter if you haven't already. Adam Martin. It's right there at the bottom of the screen. Check us out at MMAOddsbreaker.com. Check our YouTube channel out. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Tell your friends about it, guys. I'd appreciate that. Also, check me out at bjpenn.com and MMARaise.net. So today, I'll be recapping UFC Uruguay, a decent card, I guess. There was a couple of really good fights, some good finishes too. A couple of fight announcements and a few pieces of news. But the main bulk of today's show will be recapping UFC Uruguay. So let's just get right into it. Overall, okay card, I guess. Like I said, there were some good finishes for sure, some standout performances. I'll talk about the fight of the night in a second, but let's just start with the main event. Valentina Shevchenko defeats Liz Carmouche via unanimous decision. 50-45 across the board. It was a clean sweep for Valentina. She gets the job done, defends her title for the second straight time after knocking out Jessica back in June in Chicago at UFC 238. So she's now actually 4-0 as a flyweight with wins as well over Priscilla Cachoeira in a non-title bout and Joanna Jędrzejczyk, where she captured the vacant belt. So she's looked great at flyweight for sure, but I didn't think this was a great fight. This was kind of a boring fight. That's just how I felt about it as a fan watching. There just wasn't much action, and it takes two to tango. So Liz Carmouche really didn't do much with the opportunity. She gets a title shot that not many people really felt she deserved, and she did lays an egg out there. Like, it wasn't a great performance by her. She has beaten Valentina in the past, but in this fight, she just was kind of content to lose a decision, in my opinion. She didn't really do anything crazy to change the tide of the fight. The fight was not going her way. At that point, you kind of got to just go for it, I think, and she just didn't really do that. So to me, a very disappointing performance here by Carmouche as a challenger, but Shevchenko did what she had to do to get the win. I just feel like she could have did more. I think she could have finished this fight if she was a little bit more aggressive. And I understand what she said. In the post-fight press conference, she talked about this. Guillermo Cruz, the MMA fighting, asked her, what do you think about the boos and did it affect your performance? And she said, she heard them, but she just wanted to make sure that she didn't make any mistakes and get caught by Carmouche or get taken down and I guess submitted. But to me, she had this fight in the bag and she could have let loose a little bit more. So I don't know. It just wasn't a great fight. It was kind of a boring fight. A lot of fans were not pleased with this one. People were just like, oh man, this fight's taking so long. It was a long fight of not much of anything. So she gets the job done. Shevchenko's amazing. Don't get me wrong. I just didn't think this was the greatest fight she's had. But it is what it is. And like she said, coming off a knockout win over Jessica by a head kick, it's kind of hard to top that. So it kind of just was a bad spot for Valentina. And also, keep in mind, this fight was booked on pretty short notice. She just fought 2 months ago. She almost did the UFC a favor taking this fight. They needed a main event for this card. So listen, Valentina's great. I don't want to be too critical of her because she's amazing and she won this fight 50-45. I just think you got to give the fans a little bit more than what they gave. And again, that's on Carmouche too as a challenger. She didn't do anything in this fight. So just not a great fight. And we'll see what happens next. I think Katlyn Chookagian probably is next for Valentina. She's already on her social media calling out Valentina, saying she wants to fight her. So she's ranked number 2 in the division. Jessica is still ranked number 1. So right after I is Chookagian. They haven't fought yet. It makes sense. I don't really give Chookagian much of a chance in that fight. Just think Shevchenko's everywhere. I feel like it might look like this fight, just almost a stand-up version of it, just where Shevchenko outpoints her. But we'll see. I mean, maybe the fact that fight's going to take place mostly on the feet, Shevchenko could get loose and knock out Chookagian just like she did to Eye. So we'll see what happens. I just feel like this matchup maybe stylistically wasn't the greatest matchup for Shevchenko to really shine. But either way, she gets the job done. 50-45 across the board. You can't complain about that too much. So Shevchenko wins the fight, defends her belt, and at this point, she's probably the number 2 pound-for-pound women's fighter in the world behind Amanda Nunes. I think you'd have to say that. I think she's a little bit above Cyborg at this point. Next up, Vicente Luque defeats Mike Perry via split decision in the co-main event. Amazing fight. Just an absolute war between two of these guys. Oh, man, great fight. Vicente Luque is just an unbelievable fighter right now. He's 27 years old. The guy is so good. 10-2 in the UFC now. He's on a 6-fight win streak. He called his shot after the fight. He said, I want to fight someone in the top 10. I want to fight Stephen Thompson. You got to give this guy what he wants. I mean, he deserves it at this point with that kind of win streak and the fights he puts on. Like, this was his first decision win in the UFC. He was 9-2 before that with all his wins by knockout or submission. So even though it went to the decision, it was an amazing fight. It was a split decision, very close fight. Could have went either way. Luque did more damage and got the job done. And speaking of Mike Perry and the damage, I mean, that nose, that was probably the worst broken nose I've ever seen in MMA. It was horrible. Poor guy. Hope he's okay. He seems to have a good attitude about it. He's on his social media saying that, you can't knock me out, just break my nose. So, man, Mike Perry, listen, I'm critical of this guy at times because I don't feel he's completely well-rounded as a fighter, but he really has shown something to me in his last couple of fights. He's putting on better performances, I think, that go the distance, which is good to see because before when he came up in the UFC, he was just a knockout artist. Goes to the fight with Aldrich, loses the decision. I think that really changed the way he thought about fighting because since then he's been a lot more comfortable fighting the full 3 rounds. So even though he lost the fight, I think Mike Perry's stock raises in this fight. I think people respect him a lot more. It was a great performance by him, even in defeat. He could have easily got the nod, but that badly broken nose at the end, that was not a good look for the judges, and I think that's why Luque won the fight. So amazing fight. Luque definitely deserves a top 10 guy. Mike Perry, once he heals up, he'll probably get a top 15 guy, even though I don't know if he deserves it based on his wins and losses. UFC loves this guy. The fans, I think, really like this guy, and he's a lot of fun to watch. Back-to-back fight of the nights now. He's actually won 4 performance bonuses, I think, in 10 UFC fights or 11 UFC fights. So that's a good ratio. The guy's great. So Mike Perry, even in loss, I was very impressed with him. But Luque is the story of the fight for me. The guy is unbelievable. I'm a huge fan of Vicente Luque, and it's just a matter of time, I think, before he really does contend for the belt. He's very close. He just needs another couple. He needs like one really big name in his resume, and then he can start asking for the big name guys like Colby, Usman, Masvidal, those kind of guys. He needs that one tier below them, like a wonder boy. That's a perfect call for me. So we'll see what happens. I think the UFC should reward him with that fight, or even Rafael dos Anjos, like someone like that, someone between like the 5 and 10 spot in that division. I think makes a lot of sense. Next up, Luis Garagori defeats Humberto Bandeira via unanimous decision. Garagori, the lone Uruguayan fighter on the card, gets the win here. I mean, Bandeira, I did pick him in this fight. Also, I went 9-4 in my pick, so that's not too bad. I did okay in this card, but this was one fight where I obviously didn't have a great read on it. I just thought Bandeira with the experience in the UFC would help him here, but the guy's just not that great. He's 1-3 now in the UFC. Probably gets cut here. I don't think Garagori's great either, but clearly in this fight, it was a good matchup for him. Get the job done in a clean sweep. So good for him. But I don't know. I'm not seeing a ton out of this guy, but we'll see what happens. Maybe I'm wrong about him. I just don't see a ton of star potential or anything like that. Although at this point, I think they can take any fighter from Uruguay and book them on these kind of cards. Although I don't know when they're going to go back to Uruguay. I think probably maybe in a couple years or something. But it seems like they go to these South American countries besides Brazil just once every so often. Next up, this is one of the best fights of the night as well. Volkan Oezdemir defeats Ilir Latifi via KO punches. I love this matchup for Oezdemir. Even with the 3-fight losing streak, I love this matchup for him. Just a guy in Ilir Latifi, so small compared to him. A guy who backs up a lot in Ilir Latifi and a guy who gets tagged a lot. Ilir Latifi's very tough. He's very hard to knock out. That was actually, well, he's been knocked out 4 times technically, but he's pretty tough to knock out. I think we could say that. Look at the guys he's been finished by before. And you can't count the Blackwood's one because it was to the body, but as far as the chin, Bader and earlier in his career to Mizuno. So he's very tough to finish, and Oezdemir gets the job done. Just shows how much KO power Oezdemir has. The guy snapped a 3-fight losing streak with this win, so good for him. Oezdemir's now 4-3 UFC with 3 knockout wins, so he's clearly one of the top 10 guys. And for Latifi, he was already talking about moving up to to heavyweight after this fight. Not lightweight, heavyweight. And that probably does seem like a good move for him at this point because he, even though he's short, I believe he cuts a lot of weight to make 205, and also he's 36 years old, so he's getting up there in age. It seems like the weight cut's something that he doesn't want to do anymore. So I do believe he will move up to heavyweight in his next fight, and we'll see who he gets. He called out Derek Lewis, but I don't think he's going to get Derek Lewis after getting knocked out by Volkan. And I should mention Volkan wins the bonus for performance of the night, and Luque and Perry won bonuses as well for fight of the night, of course. Next up, Rodolfo Vieira defeats Oscar Pichota via second-round submission. Nice performance here by Vieira, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Took down Pichota, submits him pretty quickly in the second round. Not much to say about this fight. I think everyone kind of saw this fight going that way, so good for this guy. Pichota's probably getting cut now. He's 1-2. Actually, he's 2-2 in the UFC, but he's lost his last 2 fights by submission. Hasn't won a fight since early 2018. I don't really see him sticking around. But for Vieira, the guy definitely has the potential. I mean, he's only been fighting as a pro since 2017. He's already got 6 wins by stoppage in 6 tries. So clearly he has a lot of finishing prowess, which I'd like to see. Next up, very close fight here. Enrique Barzola defeats Bobby Moffett by split decision. Always kind of funny when one guy gets the 2 scorecards, the other guy gets excuse me. Yeah, I'm looking at the scorecards right now. 30-27, 29-28 for Barzola, and 29-28 for Moffitt. But if you look at MMA, a lot of people thought Moffitt won the fight. So it's kind of funny that Barzola won the fight. But again, he's from Peru. It's pretty close, I guess, to Uruguay. I feel like there was maybe some home cooking here. I mean, it was a really close fight. But I feel like a lot of people thought that Moffitt won the fight. So we'll see what happens here for these guys next. I think Barzola is decent, but to me, he's kind of like a decision fighter. Look at his wins. I did pick him in this fight, so I'm glad he won. But like 6-2 now in the UFC with all 6 wins by decision. All 8 of his fights have gone the distance. That's not great looking forward. And for Moffitt, he loses a fight, but I still think he's decent, and he's losing close fights. Like the Bryce Mitchell fight was very close as well. So we'll see what happens for Moffitt next. But a lot of people did think he won this fight, so we'll see. Next up, this was a fight I did not see going this way. Gilbert Burns defeats Alexei Kunchenko via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. I was very impressed with Gilbert Burns in this fight. I did not expect this fight to go this way. I thought Kunchenko would control the fight everywhere it went, but Burns used takedowns when he needed to and outstruck Kunchenko as well. So he had to kind of endure the last round of getting punched in the face, but other than that, it was pretty much a smooth sailing for Gilbert Burns here. He's looked really good as of late. 3 straight wins. He's won 5 of his last 6 fights. This was his first fight at welterweight. I'm curious to see what he does at welterweight. I think this is a good weight class for him. He looked decent in this fight as far as size and stuff goes. So I'm curious to see how he does going forward. I think this is a big win. Kunchenko is a decent fighter. He's 35 years old, sure, but he's 20-1. That was his first loss in 21 fights. So this was a big win for Gilbert Burns, in my opinion. I was very impressed with him here, picking up the upset win. Next up, Ciro Gane defeats Rafael Pessoa via first-round arm triangle choke. I think everyone saw this one coming. Pessoa, man, this guy I don't think is UFC caliber. His striking was really, really rudimentary in this fight. Gane just was very patient, picked him apart when he needed to, and then got the fight to the ground and submitted this guy right away. So good win for Gane. He's 4-0 now in MMA, so he's still very green, but clearly a lot of potential. Next up, another upset. Marina Rodriguez defeats Tisha Torres via unanimous decision. Clean sweep again for Rodriguez. I really thought about picking her in this fight. I should have, and at the last second, I switched to Torres just based on the experience. But I just think Tisha Torres is just done as a high-level fighter. And, looking back at her record, it was hard to say that considering she had just lost like the top girls in the division. But at this point, she's lost 4 straight fights. She doesn't put on exciting fights. She'll probably get another fight because the UFC, I think, they feel like they owe her something. She's been around the promotion for 5 or 6 years now, but she's just not an exciting fighter. Never submits. She's one submission her whole career. Never knocks anyone out. 15 fights as a pro. 1 fight's ended inside the distance. And if you include the tough fights, 18 fights and 1's ended inside the distance. I just don't see room on the UFC roster for fighters that only fight to decision. So, we'll see what happens. She might get another fight, but I wouldn't be surprised they release Tisha Torres as well. And for Rodriguez, that's obviously a big win for her. Next up, Rogerio Bortonin defeats Raleigh and Paiva via first-round doctor stoppage. I mean, this was just one of the nastiest cuts I've ever seen. It's funny. This fight was crazy, right? Because the referee stops the fight early on. They check on Bortonin. Then the guy says, oh, no, the fighter starts standing. He's like, oh, no, you guys have to go to the ground again. So the guy calls time, and the commentators, I think it was Bisping, he's like, wow, what's going on with this ref? And I was thinking to myself, what the heck's going on? Then a second later, he calls time again, and Bisping's like, yo, what's with this ref? And then they showed the cut on Paiva's face, and the cut was just a huge split right here, terrible cut. He posted a picture on his Instagram. If you have a strong stomach, go take a look at it. It was a nasty, nasty cut. Doctor obviously had to stop the fight. It was in a terrible spot. So good for Rogerio Bortonin. Guys look really good in the UFC so far. It's a big win for him. I think Paiva's a decent fighter, so he'll be back. But Bortonin, talk about the flyweights. This guy's another really exciting one. I mentioned this in the podcast last week with Cole Shelton. UFC did cut a lot of flyweights, but the ones they kept around are pretty exciting. Next up, Chris Gutierrez defeats Geraldo de Freitas via split decision. This was a great fight, too. I mean, to me, this was probably a fight of the night besides Luque and Perry. This was a fantastic fight. And what I liked about this fight was both guys went for it the whole time. Both guys wanted to win this fight. They both know they needed to win, especially de Freitas in that 3rd round. He was getting leg kicked in the first couple minutes. And then there was, I think, a low blow or something. Can't remember exactly what happened, but he got a break, and then he just started walking forward, throwing bombs, and he almost won the fight. So this was a funny scorecard. 30-27 for de Freitas, and then 29-28 for Gutierrez. So very kind of weird scorecards there. I thought Gutierrez slightly edged it because of the low kicks, but it was a very close fight. Either way, Gutierrez wins as an underdog again. Next up, Alex da Silva Colo defeats Rodrigo Vargas for unanimous decision. 30-27 across the board. Not much to say about this one. He gets the job done. And in the first fight of the night, Veronica Macedo defeats Polyana Viana via first round armbar, and she wins a performance of the night bonus there. So great for Macedo. Awesome win for her. 23 years old. Finally snaps that losing streak in the UFC. She was 0-3 before this. She gets her first win, 1-3. UFC stuck with her, and they were rewarded with a great performance here as she submits Polyana Viana, who I believe is 1-3 herself in the UFC. So 2 girls at the bottom of this division, but for Macedo, that's pretty good. It's a good win. And you know what? 4 fights in the UFC, and she's won 2 bonuses in the 4. So that's a good sign going forward. Overall, a decent card. There were some good finishes. A couple of fights dragged on. I just feel like the main event kind of spoiled the night for people because it just wasn't a great fight. We've seen fights like that before, cards like this where the co-main event's the fight of the night. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. UFC 129 Toronto, Jose Aldo versus Mark Hominick, one of the greatest fights probably ever. And then the main event was GSP versus Shields, which people were like bored to death with. This kind of reminded me of that. So it is what it is. It's kind of hard for Shevchenko and Carmouche when the fight before that's an amazing fight of the night. But at the same time, I just feel like they could have been more aggressive. So overall, I'd say it's a decent card, maybe a 7 out of 10. I think overall it would be a fair grade for this card. And looking forward to this weekend's UFC 241, Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier 2. My God, I can't wait for this card. And I'll be breaking that down with Cole Shelton tomorrow morning on the podcast, probably around 11 a.m. So I'll be looking forward to doing that. All right, a couple housekeeping notes here before we get out of here. Actually, there's a few pieces of news. So Invicta FC 36, there was a very funny situation. You guys can read about this, but the referee, or not the referee, I should say, the commission told the referee which fighter to raise their hand of, and they raised the wrong hand. So it is what it is. It happens. They came back in and they corrected their mistake, but geez, I mean, that's not good. Stephanie, I think her name is Gelt. Let me pull the article up here. I think her name is Geldmacher. Let's see here. Anyways, it was an embarrassing situation. I'm just pulling the fighters up here. It was a very embarrassing situation. I mean, we've seen this happen in the UFC, though, to be fair. The Mighty Mouse versus Ian McCall fights, that happened 2012. There was a situation where they did the scorecards wrong. It was the same thing here. So let's see. Okay. So, yes, Stephanie Geldmacher was originally announced as the winner by split decision, or Victoria Leonardo. They corrected the scorecards, and Leonardo won via unanimous decision. So, again, embarrassing. And Rob Tatum from Call My Price has the scorecards. You can see, apparently it's hard to add up 9s and 10s. I don't know how that happens when your job is to add up scorecards, but it is what it is. So I'm glad they actually got the fighter right at the end. But, man, I feel bad for Geldmacher. Going in there, thinking she won the fight, getting interviewed, and then saying, oh, no, we got it wrong. You actually lost the fight. That's not fun. All right, a couple of fight announcements here. Love this fight. UFC 243, Dan Hooker is going to be fighting Al Iaquinta. He gets his wish. Dan Hooker called out Iaquinta. UFC liked the fight. Amazing fight. Dan Hooker's look great. He's won 5 of his last 6 fights, all by stoppage, coming off a huge knockout win over James Vick. Fantastic performance. And then Al Iaquinta, he is coming off a loss to Donald Cerrone at UFC Ottawa, but the guy's still fantastic. Before that, beating Kevin Lee. Before that, lost to Habib. So he also has a win over Jorge Masvidal via split decision. The guy's great. I mean, this is going to be a good fight. I'm looking forward to this matchup. Who do I favor? I don't know. It's hard to say because I thought Hooker, after that last fight, was really going to take him to a decline. I'm talking about the Barboza fight, was going to go into decline, but he looked great against Vic. So we'll see here. Iaquinta is obviously great as well. Great fight. Love it. It's going to be taking place in Melbourne, so close to home for Dan Hooker. Next up, heavyweight bout at UFC Boston between Tanner Boser and Daniel Spitz. So Boser is getting a quick run here after the last fight fell out for him at UFC 240. Boser, a 16-5-1 record in his career, making his UFC debut against Daniel Spitz here. Daniel Spitz, he's coming off a loss to Wall Harris by knockout, just 1-2 in the UFC overall. So we'll see what happens in this fight. I kind of lean towards Boser, but maybe Spitz can surprise me. He hasn't fought, though, in over a year, which obviously is not a good sign. And last up, UFC Tampa gets a fight between JJ Aldrich and Lauren Mueller. I mean, at this point, these ladies are probably at the bottom of this division. JJ Aldrich, she's 3-2 in the UFC, but really hasn't shown much. Again, all her wins by decision, and she got knocked out in her last fight by Macy Barber. And Lauren Mueller, she hasn't had much success either in the UFC. What's her record? Checking it out here. Lauren Mueller, 1-2 in the UFC, but lost her last 2 fights. Including a loss to Polyana Patel in her last fight by decision. So we'll see what happens in this fight. But I don't know. I kind of lean towards Aldrich just a little bit, just based on, I think, her grappling should probably get the job done. But they're probably both fighting for their job, considering there's a lot of new fighters being signed to that women's flyweight division. So we'll see what happens there. So as far as that goes, yeah, I think that's about it for today, guys. So thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate you guys joining me on the podcast today. I'll be back tomorrow with Cole Shelton breaking down UFC 241. Really looking forward to that card, so it's going to be fun to break it down. But until then, guys, have a great day. Follow me on Twitter at MMAOB. This podcast is available at MMAOddsbreaker.com. Go to our YouTube channel, like, share, subscribe, comment. Appreciate that, guys. Also check me out at bjpenn.com and MMARings.net. Have an amazing day, guys, and I'll be back tomorrow morning to talk about the latest in the world of MMA and then break down UFC 241. Have a good one.